150 a year or
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah, so I would commit to that, yes. I think it's extremely important. Obviously, it would be much easier if the province would help and the city didn't have to do it on its own. I was really proud to work with the federal government to get more housing dollars that required actually only federal dollars at some point because we could not get movement anywhere in the province of Manitoba. Now I hope the Premier's office, I know they want to make a difference in their community as well, and I'm willing to work with them. I had success working with Conservatives and working with them in the past and trying to get unanimous consent. And I think, at the end of the day, when a press conference is announced and they take all the kudos and the mayor sits back and just celebrates them, then so be it. Because at the end of the day, what we need is people being successful. And the vision that I have for even housing is having mixed housing. Not just all geared to rent income, but you actually have to have the doctor and the lawyer and the nurse. You need a few teachers. You need a lawyer thrown in there. You need people who are working class. You need the construction worker in a building. You need people who are maybe on a social assistance. You need maybe a few people that have just come out of addictions treatment. And all working together in the same building, trying to figure out how to live together and having those conversations. Young families, we need to mix, seniors with young people more often. And that is the vision that I have for housing in the city. It is not just simply creating like what we've done in the past. There are these ghettos that people don't want to go into.
You have to calibrate it against need, and it has to be part of a larger plan. And it has to provide all of the pieces. To take poverty on, you have to do all things on all fronts at all times. Because everything, as my friend David Crombie often said so truthfully and famously, is connected to everything else. So, addictions and mental health, what the challenges are there. If you want to get into detox, you have to get into detox right away. But you have to have housing, you have to have a safe place to call home and through that process. You finish detox, and you need to get into recovery or treatment, you need to do that right away. You can't wait 2 weeks, and people have to wait 6 weeks. If you're going to get back into sort of adjusting to community and restoring your independence, and that sometimes it's hard if you've been away from living in an apartment, do that. This is the complex level of support we have. It's estimated right now by the province. I'm not sure whose numbers are the most real, but about 3,000 people in that. 150 units is going to get swallowed up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
150 is not enough.
No.
That's it.
I'd say at least
Okay.
twice that to start. And that's going to be a challenge, I appreciate. But I think you have to benchmark not about what was, but about what is enough to really, really change. And in addition to housing, all the other things that we talked about. Our community health centers are so massively underfunded right now. And their underfunding is costing us a lot of government tax dollars for other things. So that's why I'm saying these things have to all work together because you have to flip the ecosystem. You can't just do a one-off.
Okay.
Is that the short question?
Will you build 150
No.
new rent gear to you?
No, I will not. You know why? Because the private landlords of Winnipeg will do that if we let them. And I believe in Winnipeggers, I believe in the strength of Winnipeggers, and I believe that together Winnipeggers can solve our big problems and Winnipeggers can do amazing things. And what we have to do, as we were talking about earlier, is we have to stop excluding groups of people from the conversation. And today, private sector landlords have been completely and 100% excluded from the conversation around solving the affordable housing problem.
One of the ways that I believe we can put more emphasis on nonprofit housing is changing the city zoning bylaws. My commitment is to reduce or merge the downtown zoning bylaw with the entire city. That way we can really look at addressing nonprofit housing citywide instead of specific locations within the city.
Okay. Would you support and commit to make Property Histories ask for build 150 new rent geared to income housing units annually over 10 years and provide a total of 7 full-time city staff dedicated to supporting their development?
Yes, I would.
I envision that we can then go to individuals, perhaps those living on the street or in transit shelters, and say, you can't stay here. Not because we're kicking you out to go down to another bus shelter or down to some other place, but come with us to the housing that we have for you with the wraparound supports for you as well. so that people, you know, can come off the street and get the shelter and the services they need?
Thank you very much for that question. It's part of my plan. My plan is to work with builders to provide at least 200 affordable housing units every year. And there's a need for us to review red tape, you know, and review committee and modify our bylaws. You know, we need to make sure that we can, you know, build housing units within short period of time, because, you know, if it takes a lot of time, you won't be able to meet the needs of the people. And we need to also modify, you know, some of our bylaws to be able to build affordable housing unit as well. So it is part of my plan, because if we really want to really help Winnipeggers, we need to think outside the box. That is the only way out. If we continue to do what we do, we'll still get the same thing. So we need to think outside the box. And as a professional engineer, that is my plan. Because I have a model already. I've been working with the builders. I have a model. The only thing is to get money to start implementing all those plans.
I know we all talk about, well, we're going to talk with the federal government and federal government, you know, so I get it. Yes, the federal government right now is very supportive of housing. They have their own initiatives in place. They are actively engaging with municipalities in order to fulfill their housing requirements. That's great. We continue on that path respectfully, with compassion, with them understanding our specific needs for the city of Winnipeg. What I don't appreciate is cookie cutter solutions to housing as a whole. That's not the case in Winnipeg. We have to be very mindful of not only the demographics of the city right now, but also 5 years and 10 years down the road. I think that when we make policy and we don't actually include active communication about what we are planning for the city, what the city looks like, it is a failed attempt. We're going to have multi-generational families. We're going to have Indigenous families coming from different areas, but also our urban Indigenous population, who are definitely a group that would really, we require attention. They require our compassion and our attention to make sure that we are giving and providing the supports that they need to be in housing. The other really important part is that we talk about derelict homes. You've just heard it this past few weeks. Whereas everyone else wants to hand those homes off to developers, which we know is not the way to proceed when it comes to affordable or rent geared to income housing. I want to ensure that when we're taking title to those homes, going through that process that we have to go through under that bylaw, we then start to gift it in a way to not-for-profits. The one coming to mind right now is Habitat for Humanity or whatever other groups are out there, and there's neighborhood groups as well. They would be able to start to work with us for rent geared to income housing. So yes, to federal government, but I think that those are 700 homes right now that we know of. And if we can move on those very quickly. The second part of that derelict homes issue is the fact that from a city perspective, the enforcement is not as active as it needs to be. They are missing some staff. They don't have the full-time staff that they need to ensure that the processes that are already in place, the mechanisms and the tools that are already in place can be actually fulfilled. So we need to make sure that that part is also being done, because without that, we're not going to get to that access to those 700 homes. And I don't mean access in a different disrespectful way. I mean access as in you've abandoned it, you've left it. Now it's our job to take title to it. We pass it on to various not-for-profit groups, hopefully even Indigenous groups who can then plan based on their own needs, those 700 homes. So that will help, but that's not going to be it all. That won't be all of it. And planning and strategic planning is really based on leadership. And like I said when I started this conversation, budgets are based on priorities. My priorities going into this election, whether it's in the discourse during this campaign or when I'm mayor, is poverty, it's homelessness, it's addiction, it's getting people lifted out of those places. It is to rectify some of the social failures that we're walking by every day and acting like it's all okay. It's not all okay. It's not all okay. It's absolutely absurd what we are seeing on the streets of the city. And it goes against everything that we are as Winnipeggers.
We need 150 new units a year, and so that's a target, and I think we need to move in that direction. Maybe in some ways we can do better than that. But there are other tools other than the community housing land trust, and other candidates too have been talking about the vacant homes that are out there, and I see a lot of desire to move on those houses quickly. And the housing trust is a great fit for it, because what can happen is that the municipality can just literally transfer the asset, the land part of the asset, to the housing trust, to have a place that the community is upholding, to be able to really then turn that opportunity. Like this is what excites me about Winnipeg, is that problems, I think, are really opportunities in disguise. And so it's like, wow, we've got this derelict housing problem. That's so exciting, because we can turn those houses using new tools into places for human beings to live. And many of them need to be, if not most of them, need to be fixed up. Wow, isn't that awesome? We can hire people who currently don't have access to the labor market to work. And if there are people that, for example, have been in contact with the police, wouldn't it be amazing to have a city where the police are paying the nonprofit for the benefit of the reduction in workload that's being caused from hiring people to fix up those houses? So we're moving money in a direction where the good things that we want in the city are being valued, and I just don't think that's the case now.
Yeah, when I first read that number of 150 some time ago, I thought, yeah, I mean, that seems really reasonable. In fact, I think we should be doing more, right? I also when I was talking to some of the folks at some of the shelters, you'd ask how many people are experiencing homeless, need a house, and the number was in the thousands. And so we look at the bigger challenge of how many people need this type of housing, and we're looking at the stock of housing, that we have existing right now. Is it there? Is it can we build this amount of housing fast enough? And I think we can. We can. We just need to put our mind to it. And since that point, I've really started to talk to a lot of organizations, associations that are focused on nonprofit housing, low-income housing. So we was just working with somebody from the Harriet Street Housing, looking at how the struggles that they're going through right now to provide low-income housing for seniors on a perfectly good lot, empty surface lot that's been there forever. It's actually in my neighborhood, right over, not too far from this building, actually. And the process takes forever to get this done. And one of the steps that was a big hurdle was a variance that needed to be overcome because of parking minimums and a number of other things that make it really hard to create housing on a smaller scale. Most private developers these days, they're going to be looking at the costs of building, what the profits are available to building. And that's why I think when they look at those things without any other incentive, to build lower income housing, it's just off the table for them because it's not cost effective. And so if we want developers to be building this, first of all, private developers, we need to figure out ways of either incentivizing them or mandating that these, at least maybe a floor or some units per floor, are built. They can be smaller units, but it just needs to happen. One other thing I was early on in the campaign, policy statement that I brought out, which was really important to me from my work that I've done here in the West End, was just on vacant houses. So my thought on these is, and I watched and documented over the last 5 years, many of the houses getting boarded up. They would maybe get broken into, and then they would get burnt down. So they're not being used for housing. They're an eyesore. They're not a safe space. And so I wanted to implement a tax on those houses if they're boarded up. And currently, right now, the city does charge a fee, but it takes way too long for that fee to be implemented. And so I'd like to speed it up to 6 months. If it's boarded up for 6 months, let's start charging the fee, and instead of 1%, let's double it to 2% of the assessed property value. You know, on a $250,000 house, it would bring in roughly $5,000 a year. That's actually a significant hit to a person who's just sitting on a property and not doing anything with it. You know, at $2,500, you know, at 1%, it's not that big of a hit, and somebody who owns multiple properties can afford to just, you know, assume that for a certain period of time. We have way too many of these houses, so we need to be more strict on them, so that they are turned over, they're sold to somebody who will create affordable housing, whether it's another private landlord or not-for-profit housing. You know, that's an option for sure.